Hey everyone, I'm Josh with J&T's Journey, and this week we're going to talk about our Safiery Ultrasonic tank level sensors that we have fitted to the honeypot. Hey everyone, I'm Josh with J&T's Journey, and today I want to have a quick chat to you all about the Safiery Ultrasonic tank sensors that we have fitted to the honeypot. Namely, we want to talk about the ones that do work and the ones that don't work. We'll talk about these later, but first we'll have a quick chat about the fluid level sensors. These are the gas level sensors. There's a reason that these are in my hand and not on the gas bottles. But we'll talk about the fluid level sensors. So we have two fluid level sensors, ultrasonic tank sensors, fitted to the honeypot to monitor our diesel heater tank level. And I do actually need to replace this tank because it's bowed out a bit. But monitors our diesel heater tank fluid level and also the water tank level that we have in our camper. Now, right now we're rocking 62 litres worth of water in the camper. There are some plans to make some changes to the camper that's going to increase that water capacity, but for now we only have a 62 litre tank, so we do need to be really careful around how much water we use and when we use it. So we needed level sensors. Now there are a few options. We chose to go with the Safiery Ultrasonic tank level sensors. As best we can tell, they're extremely accurate. They work very, very well. They're not perfect though. We're using them with the Victron GX Tank 140, which is a plug-in module to our Victron, full Victron system in the camper. It just made sense to integrate the sensors with that system, and these sensors are advertised as working with that system. The Victron GX Tank 140 has two banks of two sensors on it, so it's got 4 inputs in total, and 2 of those are powered from the device, and 2 of them are powered from whatever power you feed into the unit. Now, the 2 that are powered from the device power the sensors with 24 volts. These sensors are advertised as working with 24 volts, except that wasn't our experience. When we first purchased the sensors, we purchased 2 sensors, and the one on the diesel heater up the front here worked on 24 volts more or less all the time. But we did notice once an hour, once every 2 hours, it was like the sensor would reset and the readings would drop out, which would throw an alarm up on our monitoring unit. The level reading would go to 0 and then come back again. The second sensor, we powered off one of the 24 volt outlets. So there's both of these coming off the 24 volt outlets on the Tank 140. The second sensor, we powered off the 24 volt outlet, and these are rated to 36 volts. So these should power just fine off 24 volts. The second sensor wouldn't read on 24 volts at all. I've got a bucket of water here. Admittedly, it's not very clean. I've got the sensor held up against the bottom, trying to establish whether or not I've got a faulty sensor, and it's just not flashing. It's got good contact into the bottom. You can see it through the thing. A nice big air pocket and no flashing light. We sent a clip to Safiery and said, hey, look, this sensor's not reading. I couldn't even get it to read using their coupling fluid, which is essentially KY jelly, using their coupling fluid on a bucket of water. I couldn't get it to read at all on 24 volts. If I moved the sensors to 12 volts, however, what I found was that this sensor up the front here on the diesel tank read perfectly, rock solid, never drop out, no issues supplying it on 12 volts. The second sensor was intermittent. So after a bit of back and forth with Safiery and trying to get through on their customer service, they eventually sent out a replacement sensor, and I had the same behavior as I had with this one on that one. Was that it was sort of okay on 24 volts, but not consistent, but it would read rock solid on 12 volts. Now we run a 12 volt system in the camper, and we're supplying the GX Tank 140 with 12 volts. So for those 2 channels that have a 12 volt power supply, that was fine. We could use those. But we've since had an issue with these. And we'll take a look underneath the camper because I've just discovered this issue with the second tank today. This one's fallen off. It's been reapplied. We're starting to have a problem with the other one. And I'll show you what that problem is, and then I'll show you how we fix it. We're underneath the van now, having a look at the ultrasonic sensor on the main water tank. It's a bit tight under here, so you'll have to excuse the shaky video. The Safiery sensor that we had on the diesel tank, I have actually removed and re-glued because the standard epoxy that these things come with, that's supplied by Safiery, is like a 5-minute araldite, and 5-minute araldite's great for short-term applications, but longer-term applications, especially where they're exposed to water, it tends to lose its stickiness. Now the advice from Safiery is to heat up the surface with a cigarette lighter first to drive the oils out, clean the oils off, clean it off with like some wax and grease remover or something like that, and then apply the epoxy. And that's what we did here. But while the one on the front, the diesel tank actually fell off, this one hasn't fallen off, but we are starting to get intermittent readings. And if you have a look just here, you can see we're starting to get a gap here. Get that in focus. You can see we're starting to get a gap here, and the epoxy is delaminating from the tank. Now we have had, the van has been sitting stationary for about the last month, and we've been getting intermittent readings on and off with no movement in the van at all between reading and not reading. I believe that this has delaminated, and I'm going to have the same problem with one up front. So let's just see what happens. This should be a virtually unbreakable bond here. Like, if these are stuck on properly, these should not be removable. I reckon I'm going to slide this knife in and it's going to pop off. So let's see what happens. There it goes. Yep, same problem as the front. So the 5-minute epoxy that they supply, it's just not up to the task. So we're going to have to clean that off, and we will refit that with the epoxy that I recommend, and I'll show you what product we'll use. What I've done off camera is I've separated the ultrasonic sensor, which sits inside the ring, out from the ring, and it's just a sliding fit. There's nothing actually bonding that together until you glue it on. And I've ground all of the epoxy off and cleaned out the little groove that they have there to retain the excess glue, and made sure that the sensor is going to fit back in there. Now the bonder that I'm using to rebond this onto the bottom of the tank is Weld Plastic Bonder. Now this is a high strength adhesive, but it doesn't set completely rigid. It does still have a little bit of flex in it. And this stuff I've used on the diesel heater tank works really, really well. So what we're going to do is I'll crawl underneath, I'll clean up the area on the tank where it needs to be glued to, then we'll mix a little bit of this up, and we'll put the ring back on, put the glue on, put it back in, and then just while it sets, because this is a slow setting bonding agent, we will put the jack underneath and just put a tiny little bit of pressure underneath it just to hold it in place while this stuff sets. Alright, so it's now back in. Finding the position to get it to read again was a bit tricky because there's only a very small contact area where I can put it on this tank where it will actually read, but it's in again. There's a good amount of epoxy on there. I did actually have to mix up a little bit more. But once that sets, I now have a fair degree of confidence that that's not going to come off again, and that will read correctly. So highly recommend the Weld Plastic Bonder if you're going to take this project on.
Please don't forget to
like, subscribe and share this video.
Don't forget to turn on all notifications
so you don't miss out on any other videos.
So that's all good and great. We've got 2 working level sensors for the diesel heater, and for the diesel tank, for the diesel heater, and the water tank in the unit. And they read really, really well when they're applied properly with the epoxy that we recommend, not the stuff that comes with them. They work really well. They stay attached to the tank. They don't fall off. The epoxy that we recommend is semi-flexible, so it with expansion and contraction cycles with the tank as it goes through, you know, like normal road conditions and temperature variations in the Australian outback. They work really, really well. They actually work so well that if you look into the monitoring and this is less apparent with the water, but more apparent with the diesel. Diesel expands and contracts, or any petrochemical really, expands and contracts with temperature, and you can actually see that on the graphs in the Victron management system. You can actually see the variation up and down of a couple of percent as the temperature variations work. So these things are super accurate when they work, when they're bonded to the tank with the correct epoxy. So we liked them, like they worked really well. Happy with them. Having to re-glue them on the tanks was a bit of a pain in the butt. If you're considering the Safiery ultrasonic sensors for fluid levels, make sure, just go out and buy the epoxy that we recommend. I'll leave a link in the description to it. We have no affiliation with the people where we bought it from. You can buy it from super cheap, or I think you can get it from Bunnings and Repco and a bunch of other places. So you can go find that epoxy in your local area. The next thing we wanted to do was monitor the gas tanks. So we bought these, which are Safiery sensors. And I'm about to send these back, because on our tanks, they don't work. I spent so much time trying to get these things to work. I wanted them to work really badly. But again, like the other sensors, when these are wired into 24 volts, they just wouldn't work. They just wouldn't read at all. Not on our tanks anyway. Now, I don't have a 9 kilo gas bottle here. We have 4.5 kilo gas bottles on the drawbar. That may be the problem. I did reach out to Safiery prior to purchasing these. They don't actually specify on their website what size tanks these suit. And I did reach out to Safiery prior to purchasing these and ask them if they'll work on a 4.5 kilo gas bottle, and I got no response. I waited and waited for a response, and I tried to follow up via phone and stuff, and I couldn't get onto them, so I just bit the bullet and bought them anyway. I figured, like, if they don't work, I'll just send them back. And I got them, and I attached them to the gas tanks, and immediately I found the issue with the 24 volts again. So that's a problem, right? I've used my 2 channels that are powered by the power off inside the camper. I can wire around that, but that's really annoying. Like, I don't want to have to do that. But I persevered. I extended the cables back to the GX Tank 140, and it didn't actually matter whether I'd had them extended or not. They still wouldn't read properly. And I tried different coupling fluids, and they recommend that you sand the paint off the bottom of the tanks if you're having issues with them reading with contamination. So I sanded the paint off the bottom of the tank and polished it up and put these on. And I could get one tank to read about 50% of the time. And the other tank, when it did read, might have been correct, might have been wildly out of range. And what I mean by wildly out of range is I managed to establish that the full to empty range in these was about 0 to 1.4 volts. So 1.4 volts representing the tank is absolutely full. With the other tank, it would just randomly go to 3.5, 4 volts, which is like way out of range for these tanks. I thought maybe it was because these are in a solid carrier on the drawbar and it's an ultrasonic, it's dealing with sounds. So maybe they're interfering with each other. So I tried removing the tanks from the drawbar completely. Still couldn't get them to work. Tried multiple positions, tried multiple coupling fluids, tried a whole bunch of things, rang Safiery, fell on deaf ears, just couldn't get them to work. So I can't comment on whether or not these work on 9 kilo gas tanks, but on 4.5 kilo gas tanks, if you're watching this, find something else. What do I think of them overall? Look, they're not a cheap sensor. There's no real 2 ways of putting that. They're not a cheap sensor. The reason I went for these sensors is because I wanted a cabled solution. I didn't want something that I had to worry about batteries, replacing batteries periodically, that kind of thing. Now, the Victron system that we're running does have Bluetooth, and it does have compatibility directly with the Mopica water and gas level sensors, and that is the direction that we are most likely going to be moving in for the gas bottles. It does mean that we're going to have to make sure that we keep some spare batteries for them in the camper, but I mean, the battery life of those is supposed to be more than a year, so it shouldn't be a major issue, but I would have preferred a cabled solution. I really wanted the LPG sensors to work. And when they did work, they read really, really accurately, but unfortunately, I just couldn't get them to read consistently, and without a consistent reading, if we can't trust them, then we can't use them on the road. Like, the whole reason that we put these sensors in is because we want to go off grid and we want to know exactly how much water and diesel and gas that we have in the camper. If you're using the fluid level sensors on our tanks, they work perfectly. Once you bond them with the correct epoxy, and this epoxy that they send out is absolutely 100% not the correct epoxy, then they work flawlessly. They're extremely accurate. They're more accurate than the fluid increments in the Victron system. That's a separate issue. Victron, if you're watching this, if you can please update your fluid capacity so that you support decimal capacities, that would be really cool. Right now they only support full litres. Would I recommend the fluid level sensors to people who are looking to build a van, who don't want to have to worry about changing sensors out or changing batteries, etc.? Absolutely. Like, if you're building a van and you want a sensor that's installed, that's cabled, that is bonded to the tank, that you don't have to worry about, these things will absolutely do the job for you, and they are extremely accurate, as I said. However, the LPG sensors, my experience with the 4.5 kilo tanks is that they just don't work. I really wish they did, but at least in our situation, something about the scenario means it doesn't work. Safiery's customer support has been really hit and miss. Depending on who you talk to, you might get an instant response, you might not. The technical detail that you can get out of them for help with these things, and I'm a fairly astute guy. Like, I've got a background in electronics, got a background in comms. I do understand what I'm working with here. The level of technical detail that you can get out of them about how these things work and how to make them work is pretty low. So, you know, our customer service experience with them was not real good. And right down to things like, we sent an email. Well, we sent an email before we purchased these sensors asking whether or not they work on 4.5 kilo gas bottles, because I was concerned about that. And we never got a response. So, unfortunately, here we are, a number of months later, sending them back to get a refund. So, I'll let you guys know how that goes. Whether they send us a refund or not, we'll wait and see. Look, I hope you guys have enjoyed that. I didn't really want this to be the outcome of this video, but you know, when things don't work, they don't work. And they don't, I mean, the level sensors work just fine. The fluid level sensors, sorry, work just fine, but the glue that they send out with them is absolute crap. So, and I have told them that. Like, I did provide them that feedback, and the response that I got from that was, oh, well, at least you gave it a good try. Sorry, what? I hope you've enjoyed this little review of our Safiery ultrasonic tank sensors. It's not all bad. If you have the fluid level sensors and you want a really good, accurate reading of the fluid levels in your tanks, these are absolutely the way to go. They're very, very accurate. They're more accurate than the Victron system that we have. The LPG sensors didn't work on our tanks no matter what I tried to do, and we are sending them back to get a refund on them. The customer service experience with Safiery, though, has been pretty poor. Yeah, the gas sensors may work on 9 kilo bottles, but they certainly didn't work on ours. So I hope you've enjoyed that little review of those sensors. I didn't really want to be making a negative video, but I've always maintained that we'll be impartial, we'll be unbiased, and we'll provide our own honest, frank, upfront reviews of the things that we have purchased or the things that have been sent to us. And we did pay full money for this, right? Nobody sent these to us, nobody sponsored us this. This was the product that we wanted to put in the camper. What's next for our tank level sensors? Well, there's really only one other product on the market that's going to work with our gas tanks, and that is the Mopica Bluetooth gas level sensors. Now, they do have a battery in them, and that means that we will need to worry about changing batteries on those. I think they last 1 to 2 years, something like that, so we will need to keep a couple of spare batteries on board, but hopefully the Mopica sensors do the job for us. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate you guys hanging through until the end. If you're interested in liking or subscribing, sharing the videos, that would really be appreciated. It really does help us out. And if you'd like to follow along and support our journey further, you can become a YouTube member where you'll get early access to videos, you'll show up on the leaderboard, and you'll get a few extra perks as well. If that's something you'd be interested in, that would be a great help. Go check that out. I'm Josh with J&T's Journey, and this has been our review of the Safiery Ultrasonic tank level sensors. Thanks for watching. Cheers.